Being inside of a prison may destabilize some of the images we have about prisons. But at the same time, those images are not necessarily so easily destabilized. And this, I find, is the subject of my work. Often when I give a lecture about prisons, I try to focus on fictional films or fictional television shows. And people will ask me why. I mean, after all, there are so many excellent documentaries that tell us how terrible prisons are. But I am focused on fictional films and television and books because these are often places where the ideas about prisons are, for the majority of us, most easily secured. And in fact, even when one is a researcher, it's very difficult to imagine a prison without the images that come from these sources being in our minds. So I want to use feminism to reconsider the epistemology of the category of experience. And what I mean by that is I want to use feminism to help us to think about why, from a perspective that is focused on experience, we can also begin to question how experience is invoked. By this I mean to say that Black feminism has often been described as a form of theory that is mostly attentive to experience, that it must be grounded in experience, that in order that it not be taken from Black women, there must be attention to those who have experienced their lives as Black women. And this is a very important feature. But it leads to some rather uncomfortable things, which have to do with the impossibility of ever establishing authority solely through experience. So I refer to prison as a border. Prison is a border in the sense that it has often been analogized to the third world. And here I am in the global south, and I want to have us think about the implications of arguing that the prison is like the third world. Most of the time, when this is discussed in the United States, it is discussed as if the third world is not the subject of debate, but rather the focus is on the topic of the prison. So it is an analogy that is made without a terrible amount of responsibility. But there is another way of thinking about this. We can, in fact, attend to prison as a border in multiple senses. We can, in fact, begin to consider in what ways the prisons can be conceived of as a third world. References to the third world conditions inside the US are designed in the United States both to shock and to shame, and they have an important political effectiveness. Quite quickly, these descriptions convey the texture of the prison industrial complex, which sexualizes and racializes economic relations in a familiar pattern. We can also quite quickly begin to discuss poor health care and access to all care, the overcrowding, and the exploitation of labor. In our visual culture, in our films and television, this translates to specific styles of camera work that convey a dark, chaotic mass as a backdrop for the potential, yet always challenged development. See. So there's a style of camera work that conveys a dark, chaotic mask as a backdrop for the potential yet always challenged development of the protagonists, or the people who are the main subjects. Now, prisons are not all the same, but like the analysis of the state, the prison is distinguished by a particular set of functions that are increasingly globalized and universalizing. Prisons are not all the same, but like the analysis of the state, the prison is distinguished by a particular set of functions that are increasingly globalized and universalizing. Prisons have been more efficient at reproducing racial and sexual economies than perhaps any other space. And the technologies for achieving this bear some direct attention. Even for those who consider that prisons are not their main object, or even for those who acknowledge prisons as an extreme example, at the periphery of their framing. As our descriptions even of the intersections of race, class, gender, and sex continue to be incommensurate with the new racial formations that the prison helps to describe. I want to suggest, and I think it's easier when I speak rather than read my text, I want to suggest that it is significant to consider a way of marking and writing the world from the vantage point of seeing the prison opposed to